Hello and welcome to another drawing demo. Today I want to discuss drawing a group of objects. The last thing we did was grapes, and so now we've assembled the grapes and two other subjects that we've done before, namely the pear and the bird's nest with the seashell. What I wanted to do is show you how you can, one, draw a still life, which is comprising of a group of objects like this, and two, find a fortunate composition. Now Fibonacci, who I think his first name was Leonardo, we always just address him as Fibonacci, was an Italian mathematician around the time of the Italian Renaissance who was inspired by some Indian mathematics, and he discovered the number sequence that he found in nature occurring again and again and again with the formation of seashells, the spiraling of anything that he found in nature, and how plants grow and how the branches extend from the stems of the plants. And this helps us with what we are going to do, and that's addressing compositional problem solving that we have before us right now. I think that any art student should at least be familiar with this subject. And without getting too mathematical about it, I just think that the learner should be able to connect the dots between 1s, 2, and 3. 1, the Fibonacci number, 2, the golden rectangle, and 3, just making nice compositions. So we can just go and look at it like this. The golden rectangle is a format that an artist can use to frame their artwork. If you notice, you'll have a lot of stationery in the form of a rectangle. You have a lot of standard sizes in the form of a rectangle. Without going into all the different standard sizes, you'll understand that this rectangle is somehow derived from what's called the golden rectangle. What I'm going to have us do is use a viewfinder, and this is a viewfinder. So this viewfinder was made with Sharpie marker and a piece of acetate, and I do have a video on my YouTube channel that explains how to make this. If you take a look at this configuration, you'll notice that there are 9 squares, or 9 rectangles, and where the lines intersect with the vertical and horizontal, that's considered a hotspot. A hotspot in this case could be right now the seashell. And what happens is, based on this idea, the viewer is sort of like guided to the seashell more than, say, the grapes on the bottom left. Now, in using this viewfinder, the idea is not to get so dogmatic about it, where you have to put an object where the line intersects in all 4 areas. So this is something that is very important not to do. What I want to do is toy with the idea of coming up with a couple of compositions of this still life using this device. And the first thing I would recommend for the learner is probably avoid drawing the entire still life. And this will invite the artist to get into what is known as bleeding off the page or cropping. So, for instance, if I were to move my viewfinder to the left, notice how some of the pear is outside of the frame. Well, that means that that part is not to be drawn. And so, as this gets smaller, I am zooming in. As this gets bigger, I'm pulling out. This is not how you use a viewfinder like this. You use a viewfinder like this. And so now I'm going to kind of shop around without moving the still life or the camera, and I'm just going to use this. And so it's a little awkward at first. The idea is to flirt with just sort of fluidly moving in and out, and decide, what do you want to focus on? Like, let's have that corner of the red book draw the attention of the viewer. So maybe with the rule of thirds I can play with that. This is too much of a giveaway. To have it in the center is, for right now, the beginning art student, a no-no. Try to avoid putting the subject in the middle. Try to bring it to left or right of the middle. So in a sense, put an X in the middle of this viewfinder. The 4 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, that intersect will give us four hot spots here, 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 here. So you could conceptually use, like, say, this dot here to zoom in. Maybe it's like that. I'll zoom in like that. This is known as the horizontal or the landscape format. How about the vertical or the portrait format? We would have something like this. Now what I can do is maybe flirt with the idea of having the bottom left hotspot as the attention grabber for the viewer. So you see how this works. And so anything within this area will be depicted in your drawing, but anything outside will not. So watch my other video on how to make this, and let's get started. What I have here is some bond paper, and I divided up into 4 rectangles, and I subdivided each rectangle into 9 smaller rectangles. Now if you take a look at the viewfinder, it's pretty much the same size 4 times. The length from here to here is 12 centimeters, and from here to here is 9 centimeters. And then each little square is 3 by 4 centimeters. You could use these measurements or come up with some of your own. The idea is to keep it rectangular. And if you look at a lot of standard sizes, a lot of stationery, a lot of canvases you buy at the store, and even your school binders, they're all rectangular. Look at your TV screens and your computer screens, they're all rectangular. And the aspect ratio, dealing with relationship between the width and the height, somehow corresponds to, I believe, the golden rectangle, and goes all the way back to the Fibonacci number. And for us, the rule of thirds. So the idea is to create something like this so you can do your thumbnails. I use Sharpie for the outer frame. And I used a Derwent Graphite tint for these vertical and horizontal lines. It's a good sketching pencil. As you can see, I was able to sketch in, using my viewfinder, a nice composition, and then I just was able to brush away, and you have a ghost of what I originally put there. But let's sort of pretend that doesn't exist. And so now, with my viewfinder, as I extend it out here, as I move closer to the still life, the square gets smaller from my point of view, and in relationship to the frame, the still life gets bigger. So what's happening is I'm zooming in, I'm cropping, and I want the learner to avoid drawing the entire still life. Like, the last thing you want to do is this. You have the little nest here, and you have the grapes here, and you have the pear here, and you have the book here, like that. That's something that we don't want to do. We want to zoom in and focus on a certain part of the still life. So here we're playing with the idea maybe of the pear, and it's on the bottom right of the composition. So I was shopping around for a nice composition, and I liked how this one turned out. So I recommend you focusing on only using the viewfinder to approximate where you want your composition to fall, and it alleviates you from having to use this exclusively all the time when you're always drawing. This is just a way to help you figure out how to zero in on a nice composition. Because imagine if you just had a blank piece of paper or a canvas, you started painting the still life, you're going to wind up with something like this, with the guys right in the middle. It's hard not to unless you have a plan. And so we have a plan. You focus on, again, diagonals. So this represents the bird's nest, including the stray piece of grass that sticks out like a point, like that. And then it comes down here like that, and then the book comes in like this, and like this. And notice how I treat it like a block. And notice how I'm not really putting any detail on the inside. And then I've got the pear over here, and something like that. So at this point, you might want to even consider lightly drawing in a silhouette. Now, the reason why, and I've seen different kinds of demonstrations and stuff, and I see like examples where they do detailed thumbnails. I don't think I want you to do that. I want you to sort of get into the abstract over here. And so now you can probably, you know, move in with the inner shapes, like say of the pear coming in here. And I'm not even going to draw the stem. And then also, I predetermined that the seashell is somewhere right here. And I made it like a little rectangle, a little squarish type rectangle. And these are the things you want to do, folks. I don't expect you to do much more than this. Some people want to be a little bit more into the detail, and so if that were to happen, you'd probably get something like this. And what's good about this technique is if you don't like what you did, you can always do that. So we could even purchase this thing by getting into a little bit more detail. So I'm going to come in here like this, and you'll see how my style kind of comes into play here. At this point, I can put the viewfinder down and just, you know, now I can look at my still life knowing that my more important parts are going to fall into place of these 4 hotspots. What are the 4 hotspots? Here. Let's use this. Here, 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 and here. So these are the areas that you want to use to help determine a nice composition. And so that's what we're going to do right now. So you can see here that the seashell kind of comes in like that. So right now I'm just really thinking about getting a nice arrangement here. And I'm not going to be too demanding of the details. You see how I'm just kind of skating along here, so to speak. And let's see, let's get the book. And I'm really tempted to put a lot of detail, but we don't need that. We don't want that per se. And these are approximations. So it's like approximations that pose as being exact. Exact approximations, that kind of thing. And let's see. Let's take a look at this. We have our nest, our seashell, our red book, our pear, and our grapes. Now, if you want, you can play around with the value, but I caution you to avoid doing too much modeling. You might want to break things down like this. And just sort of like tell yourself, okay, here's the background. And notice I'm only using the side of my pencil. And I'm not going to even worry about getting the values completely correct in terms of darkness. I just indicate, like this could be an indicator for black. And then I can kind of like play around with the shadow here. You see how this is? I think it's important that you try this like that. Here's the shadow right here, the shadow of the pear. And we have something to that effect. And I'm thinking about, for our composition, we have a nice black background merging into the foreground that's going to be lighter, like we did for some of our real objects. We have something like that. And then we have something like this. Maybe some directional shading, showing the direction of the grass. Remember our different shading techniques, hatching, cross hatching. You might want to try that. Let's try to do that for this one. You know, more hatching, cross hatching and stuff. I did some shading, full out shading, and now I'm doing a bit of hatching. You know, there's a lot of different ways to approach this. Like, I don't want you to think that my way is the only way. This is just something that I put together over the years. Okay, see something like that. The book. Like this, maybe. Oh, I don't need to do that. The grapes, and we have like the nest coming in like this. Let's see. You might find some interesting ways of expressing your ideas through these more simplified drawings, very abstracted type attempts by yours truly. And so if anything, you want to deal with shapes. See, this is a shape, that's a shape, 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 and they're broken up into shapes of black, gray, and white. Well, I don't think I'm going to make these black. I'm going to make them like indicating black. This indicates black. So we have something like that. For the second idea, holding my viewfinder out here, I thought it'd be interesting to have the pear halfway cut off the working area, and so I have something like that. Now that alone will get me to arrange in place everything else. Like for instance, the top left of the nest is going to be expressed by this diagonal line, and then the left part of the nest comes down like that, like a vertical line, and then the shape of the grapes just kind of pop out like that. Now what I can do is, and I used a viewfinder to do this, is to determine where that shell is going to be. And from what I get, the shell kind of, let me double check this. And there's probably some real-time finagling on my end here. Yeah, that's about right. Grape kind of comes in here like that, and it kind of comes down like that. So I have the shape of the grapes here. This is kind of hard to do, gang. My arm kind of moves as I turn my head. My arm moves, so you have to use a little bit of memorization here. So I know that the seashell is going to be somewhere right around there like that, and I verify it. Okay, that's good. Now I can put the viewfinder down, and I can come in here and just sort of work this out. So I'm going to make the shape a little bit more recognizable, like that. And I want you to see some of this as I go about it. The emphasis of this demo is not necessarily just drawing from beginning to end the still life, but instead using the viewfinder and looking for a nice composition and getting familiar with the golden rectangle. So these are the grapes, and so based on the still life, the edge of the bowl that makes this nest, because a nest is like a bowl, kind of comes around like that. And now remember, I'm always looking at my subject matter. And I'm not drawing what I think, I'm trying to draw what I see. And that's why this whole idea, even looking for a composition, you're seeing it. You're seeing. Seeing is believing. You're looking at what you're doing using this format, dividing up a rectangle into nine smaller squares or smaller rectangles. It's all a part of this direct experience for drawing. So it's a theory that's applied, and that's the best kind of a theory, when you can apply the idea that you're talking about. And so that's kind of like what we have. I kind of like the idea of drawing the seashell first. Let's define our little seashell, define where it goes, and slightly how it looks. Again, we're not looking for too much detail. And then there's a strand of grass, a big piece of grass that kind of sticks out like that. Kind of exhibits a flow of movement, which is great. And so this is why you do these, because you actually fall in love with an idea before you actually commit to it. Like, I might like this idea better than this idea because of this and that and stuff like that. Where here, this is cut off right here. See that? See, that's just cut off. But this just kind of whips back into the composition like that. It's kind of neat. And so you pay attention to things that stick out in front of you in your composition. And it's the best way I can explain it. Because you don't want to be bogged down with drawing every little detail. That's something that I don't want us to have to do in the sketching stage. So we're sketching on our ideas, making rather big thumbnails. Technically a thumbnail would probably be this big or this big. And certain design schools would get a student to literally draw like close to 100 of these before they do one of these and do the finished product, right? So that's kind of like something that I don't really do. Maybe I should, but right now we're following this idea. So the grape, well, it's kind of like buy into the idea of identifying. You should be able to, I would say, like somebody asks, how much detail should I draw on the thumbnail? I would say, tell you what, based on looking at the still life, just at a glance, you should be able to see what's going on here. Like for instance, you should immediately say, oh yeah, these are the grapes to the left of me. Those are the grapes to the left of me. And well this corner, it's the book. This is the book. I didn't even draw the thickness of the book. I just made it look like a slab of wood. And then like this has to be the pear. See how that works? And that's good. And some instructors say that's good enough. Others say no, put more detail. So let's go somewhere in the middle. So I'm gonna just kind of like let's sort of use these different kind of shading techniques. So I'm going to use hatching and cross hatching to block in these dark areas. And I'm going to do hatching and cross hatching here. Again, I can predict another long video that I'm going to have to divide up into sections. I don't know how else to do it, folks. I'm not as streamlined as some of these other YouTubers. And, you know, the other thing is you want to see what's going on, right? You want to actually visually see it. This is the second best thing to doing this in what's called the brick and mortar situation for a class. Let's see, so I kind of start breaking it off here like that, and now I can come over here with dissolving my hatch marks into the lighter area, and then I come over here with the vertical marks, making this a cross hatch area. So that's probably a good way to do this, where you actually use your hatching, cross-hatching, and scribbling and stuff like that, and some gradient. But again, you don't want to get too detailed. Like for here, I can block in where the shadows might be, something like that. And then I can come in here like this. And you know, shading is important. Like why I shade is because I can sort of strategize my light and dark areas for the composition. So it does make sense to spend some time to add some values, some tones to your lines here. And so like this here, even this kind of gets tricky here, because what's going on here is this is the background. So I don't want you to get too much more detail than this. This is almost getting to be a little bit too much for my taste, because these are thumbnails. I like to put my energy in the finished product and not in the thumbnails, but I do want to put forth the ideation. The ideation is sort of like the inception of something. You know, it's popping in your head, and you set up the still life, and you start doing this. This is the conceptualizing, the ideation, and all that stuff. You're working it all out. And yes, this is very important. So let's see, this designates the background. So we have hopefully some rhyme or reason as we come in here. So here's a nest, here's a nest, and the following is a background. Let's kind of commit to that. That's where the nest ends. So I'm just indicating what this is, like this. Now with the pear, like the problem with this composition is there's no chorus shadow or anything. It's just the light area. And I don't think I'm going to even worry about shading that in for that thumbnail. I'm just going to let it go. Here's the book. This is the shadow of the grapes. Leave that white. And the grapes leave white. If you squint, you might see that as far as the group goes, it kind of goes like this. So I can do that. See that? And then this is going to be the marble. So you can pretty much commit to this like so. I'm gonna you know emphasize using a series of diagonals are ideas for this drawing. If we were to choose this particular thumbnail. So you can see they're kind of even different. So this one here, I sort of used the side of the pencil and I did that. And then here I differentiated this with this by using these kind of directional hatch lines. And here I did the directional hatch lines for the nest, but then here I committed to more of a darker background with the hatching and cross hatching. And then here I got the shadow of the grapes onto the book. And of course I can clean this up just for the sake of the viewer. Let's see, like this, like this. And like what this is a type of shorthand. It's almost like a visual code for the experienced artist. And if you want, you can even get rid of any vine charcoal confusions like that. See that? That even kind of makes it look more nice in a way. And so these are kind of like abstractions of nature. Then what's funny is you start learning about what the essence of abstract art is by doing these kinds of studies. Sort of give you a window into eventually what became modern art. It's kind of interesting connection. So I can use my eraser like so to sort of buy into what I'm going to commit to if I were to decide to do this one or the one on the left. So these are my two, well, I don't know, the grapes, maybe the grapes should have a slight, let's do this for the grapes. So I'm just going to do like a scribble technique. See that? So it just kind of helps give you a map of the territory. And then here I can kind of go like this, a gentle application of tone. And then if you're insistent on the pear, I would say, well, at least indicate the highlight from what I see there. And then you can do a sort of wrap. You're wrapping around the form now. See that? There we go. And this, of course, is all in shadow right there, so this looks a little bit more complete without us sacrificing too much time and all this unnecessary detail. And of course, though, you have to deal with a certain amount of the fidelity of these forms. Like, you don't want to make unrelated shapes to express these forms. So already you get some, what I call intellectual like arrangements. They're not the average put the subject in the middle and go from there. Now, there is a thing called central composition where you do have something in the middle and then you have stuff radiating around it. You see, the problem with that is if we just do that and that's it, you don't really get the essence of better compositions. Although sometimes you'll see something put in the middle of a painting or a drawing. So I wanted to make that clear right now. What we're doing is not that. We're doing the off to the side kind of an arrangement because you will see that everywhere. You will see that everywhere in newspapers, websites, movies, comic books, paintings and drawings and whatnot. And so that's why I like to cut to the chase and introduce the student to what's called the rule of thirds. And then for the more serious student, you can trace this back to the golden rectangle, which can be traced back to the Fibonacci number. What we have now is the vertical format, or also known as the portrait format. And so I use my viewfinder to zero in on what I think is a nice composition. So if you notice in the bottom right, we have the pear. I don't have to hold my viewfinder anymore because I got the basic lines. Notice what I used. I used a couple of diagonal lines to show the top part of, and also the side of the nest. Now notice where I found our seashell. I used a little rectangle, sort of a boxing in type of thing we've done with these individual still life drawings. And then I use like a triangle type depiction of the pear with some added lines. And then here is a very simple approach to the grapes like that. Now we can zero in and get more fidelity to these forms. Now in relationship to the seashell, the nest might end somewhere right around here like that. There's a lot of activity going on with the blades of grass, and then there's that really interesting blade of grass swooping around to the side like that. And over here we have that cool point made by a blade of grass. Remember, this whole thing is made of grass. And that ain't hay. Okay, like that. So we have our nest. Come in and kind of zero in on the shape of our seashell a little bit better. Not going to work on any kind of shading right now, just locking in the shapes. Locking in the shapes. And then I'm going to, for the grape, probably something like that. See, the grape ends somewhere right around there. And so the leaf is right here like that. And that's all I got to say about that. Come in like this. And this is the book, depicted as a block of wood almost. So we have something like that. Now we can come in I recommend rotating this like this to get the downstroke, but if I do that you won't be able to see it. So we'll just do it this way. A lot of us might find doing thumbnails and studies, these are more like studies and thumbnails, as being tedious, and I totally understand. But give it a try, especially in your learning stage. I pretty much finished the third thumbnail, and I have it as a vertical composition or a portrait format. And so I just use a series of hatching, cross hatching, and some other areas here were treated with single hatching marks to pretty much designate our game plan for this composition. So now we're going to work with the very last composition, and it's going to be another vertical format. So we're narrowing it down to the last composition. It's another vertical composition, and what I did was I zeroed in on the main subject, which I wanted to be the seashell. Notice how I have three areas that I really focused on locking down. The bottom left, it's the corner of the book, and then the right area here is a basic shape designating the pear, and then a rectangle for our seashell. So as we come in here, the idea now is to commit to more or less connecting the dots. Like that. There might be a grape showing up right over here like that. This is a little bit big, So you have to narrow it down to something like that. So come in with the diagonals to lock in our basic idea for the seashell. Like that. And the nest, the top of the nest is going to be somewhere like so. Like that. So you see how we lock that in. I use my vine charcoal to get the basic shapes, more or less using the Charles bar technique. And I'm going to come in here now and zero in on our subjects. So this is probably the main topic, the seashell. Now there is a wonderful blade of grass for this nest coming in like that. Now notice what I'm doing here. This is called drawing through the form. See that? I don't have to erase that right now. Sometimes you have to draw through the form to see how things are in relationship to each other. Placement. That way you don't have things floating. Guess we can leave that for people like David Copperfield. Or David Blaine rather, huh? But art is a magic stunt in its own right, I think. There's something to be said about it. Okay. Now for the pear. See how this diagonal approach comes in rather nicely. It's not bad. It works really good. See how that is? Blocking it in. And this is where you might have to use bold lines to describe things. See that we have to sometimes do that. I think it'd be nice to do a drawing project where we actually do more abstracted renditions of real objects, like some kind of abstraction, kind of leaning towards maybe something like comic book type visualization. But right now we're going with this. This is the core for helping you draw, getting to be a better drawer per se. And this goes a long way. These things that I'm gonna put up on my YouTube channel under drawing. So you go to drawing and you can see my other demonstrations. And I hope to improve on these. Right now you're getting the bare essentials with my sort of clumsy filming skills. But you're getting something out of it. You see how that works? You see how this goes? And if you want, like, you can clean it up right now. If you go like this. And like I say, sometimes you don't have to even shade it. For this lesson, we're going to try to deal with the shading. So again, I'm going to come over here. And if you think, well, that's taking too long, well, you could reach for your charcoal, compressed charcoal stick, and come in here like that. That's fine. That works. See, again, at this point, I know what I'm doing. I'm not just guessing. I'm not faking it till I make it. And that's what's important. We're not faking anything at all. We're really trying to get this to work. And we're doing it step by step. We have a plan. And I think somewhere here there's a little bit. And this is great to be economical. Like, I really try to lock into the most important elements of this Other artists would paint sketches. They get some canvas board, some inexpensive canvas board, or they get paper and they gesso it, and they use oil paint, and they just do these quick little sketches. This is like the blueprint of the idea, but you don't have to only do it with drawing. You can do it with paint. You can do sketches with watercolor, markers, crayon. You know, the idea is to work it out, figure it out, and I'm giving you the blueprint to do that for whatever materials you choose. I just don't think we have to make it all black, you know. It just kind of gets to be too busy. We don't have to do that. You get the idea, and that's why this whole hatching, cross-hatching technique, I think, serves us well. And we can also come in here and clean this up, you know, here and here, like that. And now we have the nest. Maybe go from the back to the front, like we talked about from when we drew some of our single objects. I'm not going to do much shading for the seashell. That's getting to be overkill. And let's see over here. Something is going on over here. Just want to indicate the activity through some hatch marks, like that. Hope you're getting all this. I hope I'm not in the way. We'll hit the pear last. I think there's some shadow here from the grape. See that? Onto the book. In the book I can just kind of indicate through some hatch marks like this. And then this is in shadow, so I can go like this. Hatch marks like that for the book. See that? And technically this marble slab is in shadow there. And the pear has some core of shadow action right here. So like this right here is all in shadow. This technique also works great for the linoleum blocks. You cut into linoleum, you'll be doing stuff like this, gouging, making hatch marks and stuff like that. There's no smudging when it comes to linoleum block. Let's see. That's why, again, drawing is a foundation to a lot of these other 2D forms of communication. And for brevity's sake, I can just say this represents a highlight and that represents a highlight, and I don't have to even I don't even have to shade that. If you want me to, I can go like this. This would be a smarty pants. So this man-made kind of shading mark is called man-made texture. There's also simulated texture, which is where you try to shade exactly what you look at. And actual texture is where it's the actual feel of the pear or the book and what have you. So I just thought I'd be cute and do this. These little marks like that just to show a value to the pear. It just helps me break things down. Do a little cleaning up maybe. Like right here, and clean up here. So you can see how using this technique of 1, making sketches, and 2, have some kind of a rhyme or reason for doing so using what's called the rule of thirds. And this is what we have.